Hey, it's State of State. We got your Nittany Line update. It's a football discussion with Tom and Justin, so kick back and press play.
With former Penn State and NFL defensive back Justin King, I'm Tom Hannafin. This is State of State. Please like, comment, subscribe, rate us, and turn on notifications. Follow us on social media at State of State Pod. Comment on our YouTube channel. And if you haven't done so already, you can become a member of our YouTube channel. For just 99 cents a month, you can get all upcoming episodes of State of State, plus our entire members-only playlist, ad-free, commercial-free. Hit the join button on our homepage or follow the link in the description of this podcast. State of State is presented by BetOnline. BetOnline is the world's most trusted betting platform and your number one source for all your sports betting action. The Final Four is upon us, and BetOnline has more ways to stay in the action with the latest odds, news, and scores, even live in-game betting while the games are being played. In between games, head over to the BetOnline casino with all the top Vegas-style games, including poker and live casino. BetOnline has the largest selection of odds on everything from college basketball to Major League Baseball, the NHL, UFC, even the Kentucky Derby, plus NFL season futures are ready for you to bet. And speaking of futures, Penn State fans, are you feeling confident that the Nittany Lions can win college football's national championship next season, or that Abdul Carter will go number one overall in the NFL draft later on this month? Lock in your futures at betonline.ag today. State of State is presented by BetOnline. The game starts here. State of State is a proud supporter of Blue White Outfitters. Blue White Outfitters was created as a retail shop meant to highlight the confidence, competitiveness, and fearlessness of the elite athletes found throughout the history of Penn State University. Check out their Lockdown U and Lawn Boys merchandise today. All sales from Blue White Outfitters directly benefit Penn State student athletes. Also, official State of State merchandise is available now. Support the show and grab State of State t-shirts, hoodies, hats, and more. Visit www.bluewhiteoutfitters.com today. Hi, everyone, and welcome to State of State. I'm Tom Hannafin. He's Justin King. It's not too often on this show that we really dive into the recruiting side of things. Justin and I are very much, we'll believe it when we see it play out on the field at Beaver Stadium. However, there is a lot of cause for excitement for Penn State football looking ahead to the class of 2026 and 2027. And our own Justin King has some firsthand knowledge of what's going on with that. There were a lot of questions when running backs coach Ja'Juan Seider left Penn State and went off to Notre Dame about the future of recruits Messiah Mickens and Kemon Spell. And now there's been a development outside of running back in that Spell and Mickens are certainly committing to Penn State in the future. And again, believe it when we see it, it's years away. But the exciting development is at wide receiver. And this is something that you know firsthand, working as a part and an owner of LIG Sports Group. Khalil Taylor out of Pittsburgh at wide receiver. This is a big deal for Penn State to go and get this caliber of talent at wide receiver. And how many times have we talked about this being a position of need? This is a good indicator altogether. What can you tell us about Khalil Taylor?
Mr. Amazing is the nickname he goes by, but it's true to standard. I mean, he is amazing when he has the ball in his hand. I like to say one-touch guys have a soft heart for those guys in the sense of like how they change the game. We put pressure on defense. A lot of times we talk about having guys that can take a bubble screen or a slant or a hitch or even take a guy up top with the right attitude about the game of football is extremely important. And Khalil fits that bill. Obviously, one of the 4-1-2 prospects that fits that mold of old, where you have speed. I mean, talk about laser 4-4-2 type of guy, probably be 4-3 by the time he gets done. But confident and playmaker. I just like put it that way. Mr. Amazing, get ready for him. But it's a great get for Penn State because it fills a critical need that they do have, even though they look good in practice this past week. Having someone like a Khalil Taylor coming into the program only heightens that probability of continue to be in that top 4 spots and making a run for national championships with players like that.
There's certainly excitement for Kyron Hudson and Devontae Ross, to your point, but that's more in the short term. This, as I mentioned, it's an indicator in that, is it problem solved altogether? No, but it's a really good indicator to get a guy like Khalil Taylor, who you know intimately. From what you understand and what you've heard since this came out with Khalil, what's been the ripple effect? Because you and I talk about it so much in this show is players follow trends. And is this a developing trend?
I mean, I think you've seen it with Messiah Mickens, and you see Kemon Spell like shutting down the recruitment, which is a big thing. Hopefully wait and see. But those are two pretty prime prospects, especially Kemon, another Pittsburgh guy, and to really take the approach of getting into that operational mode is extremely important for the success of players when they get into college. So to see these guys kind of approaching their recruiting process this way, it's admirable. I'm a fan.
Spell and Mickens were, as I mentioned before, two guys that there were Penn State fans out there concerned that with Jaywan Sider leaving the program and how great his relationships were, not only with Spell and Mickens, but plenty of running backs in the past at Penn State, that he could potentially flip them to Notre Dame, or maybe they just want to go elsewhere. From what you know of the situation, what helped Spell and Mickens make their decisions?
I mean, honestly, man, you go up to Penn State. I said it last week. There's not really any gaps if you're like a football player looking to have that comprehensive development, whether it's the right coaches, the environment, their commitment to winning. Like, again, it's a lot different than when I worked there. Like, and I would say like there's stuff that was like, this, that, and third. And I think James just recently said this like the first time in 12 years that he has complete alignment. Like I said what I said about practice before he said that, but I that's what it looks like when there's alignment. So like all those different things moving in that pace and the level of development, I don't see why a player, wouldn't want to kind of jump in that type of situation if you're looking to develop and the most out of your college opportunity.
Especially wide receiver, because it's been a bit of a drought for Penn State to have that game-changing one-touch guy wide receiver. And you and I have talked about is that Penn State is not necessarily known as wide receiver U. However, there is a track record of the Allen Robinsons, the Chris Godwins, Deshaun Hamilton, KJ Hamler, Jahan Dotson, guys who have been one-touch guys. But it's not been enough consistently over time for recruits to look at Penn State as, yep, that's a place for a wide receiver to go get developed and get to the league. That's more of looking at Ohio State and LSU as teams like that, where you can absolutely go there and you're going to have that pathway. You mentioned the alignment that James Franklin talked about. He was on Andy and Ari on 3 earlier on this week, and he was speaking about that alignment and a number of other topics I thought were really, really fascinating. I want to get to here with you, but speaking about the alignment, he said, quote, "We've been one of the most consistent programs in the country and maybe the most consistent since Penn State joined the Big Ten. The next step is to be able to win, quote, these games. There's nobody that knows that better than me and Drew Aller as well. We have to take the next step in our biggest games and our biggest moments." And I think the thing that gets lost is Penn State has been so consistent for a long time, even before James Franklin, but it has been so consistent in winning at such a high clip is that, yeah, if you were like Northwestern, for instance, and you could tell them it's like, you're going to win 10 games a year, 5 of 6 years consecutively, they'd be like, yeah, man, sign us up immediately. We would take that. So it is difficult to do. The issue for Penn State fans is that the expectations are enormous. So getting to that threshold is good, but not great and not elite, that old chestnut. So it's encouraging to hear from James Franklin's standpoint that alignment is there from the board to Dr. Benapudi to Pat Kraft, who has literally been all over Penn State athletics as of late, and James Franklin, who seems to have this team in the right spot. The thing I think that he brought up that was really interesting within this interview is he was speaking about the transfer portal and especially Beau Pribula. That was definitely a hot button issue of like, hey, we're in the middle of the college football playoff and your backup quarterback, who is a considerable contributor to your offense in select packages, hops in the transfer portal. The program, Franklin, Beau, all caught flack for this. And realistically, the way that Franklin talked about it, he said, quote, Beau had to choose, go in the portal or stay, especially at the college that he grew up being a fan of Trace McSorley. Like, you can imagine the emotional challenge that was there for a kid. Franklin went on to say the problem is Beau wanted to go on visits, and I don't know how you can go on visits and be our backup quarterback during the college football playoff. I talked to him about calling schools for him. As a quarterback, there's only so many spots. I just don't think a kid should be put in that position. How do you feel about what Franklin said?
I mean, he's right. I think it is tough to put a quarterback in that position when you're trying to stay with the team and then look at after yourself in your career. I mean, I think that's one of the things that you talk about in like the structure of college sports that needs to be looked at when you're looking at the timing of things and just the integrity of how you have to manage a football team in operation.
Especially when it comes to Beau. He outlined an interesting circumstance that, like, this got talked about, but I don't think it really got highlighted. But Franklin went into detail on this. He said in December, I think it was early December, Drew Aller announces he's coming back to Penn State for 2025. Beau goes into the portal. Drew goes on fire for the playoff run. We can all acknowledge the challenges in the game against Notre Dame, but still, Drew was very solid in those first two games. Franklin went on to say, and Drew felt the pressure to make an announcement whether or not he was coming back. He said that was a realistic concern at that point in time, that Penn State could lose both Drew Aller and Beau Pribula. I want to really think about that because there was a real world possibility where Drew Aller could have gone to the NFL draft in 2025 as opposed to coming back. And Beau Pribula, had the timing not worked out and had there not been good communication and alignment, all that stuff, a good culture and a good program, that Drew Aller could have gone to the pros and Beau Pribula could have gone into the portal, and Penn State's sitting there with like, okay, what do we do at quarterback all of a sudden? Like, when you think about that, and I don't know if you had deep knowledge of what was happening at the time with that stuff, Justin, but that's a really scary situation that Penn State sidestepped.
I mean, there's a lot of scary situations when we talk about roster management in the current state of college athletics across the board. I mean, coaches are shaking in their boots. They don't want to admit it. They have to keep a level of power, but the players can get up and leave whenever they want. Someone can come in, offer some more money. Hopefully after this April 8th ruling from the courts, we have some more clarity on how, the collective and revenue sharing budgets have to operate. And that might ease up a little bit.
And then it's the whole challenge of how much do you allocate to football, baseball, basketball, volleyball, wrestling, hockey, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So that's going to be a challenge. You talked about the portal and the money involved in it. Franklin discussed that in his interview on 3. And he said, quote, the best players in the portal have made their decision before they even go into the portal. Some people call it tampering. It's very difficult to do it, quote, by the rules. Either that or the price tag is through the roof. Here's another thing. How do you get to know a kid in a week unless they've been having conversations illegally? We work very hard to build a culture within our locker room, and I'm sensitive to that. So first off, with LIG Sports Group, you're dealing with players, families, and coaches regularly. To that first point about getting to know a kid in a week, portal opens. Oh my God, I got to go get a spot. If you're a quarterback, for instance, like there's only so many seats. How do you work that process? How do you handle that process of, like Franklin said, getting to know a team and a team getting to know a player in a week?
I mean, I think there's different ways, right? I think you have trusted people. I mean, different connectors like myself that work in the industry that are, trusted and relied on to give accurate evaluations on players, situations, fits, and kind of understanding where things are. And all it is, I mean, trying to get accurate information. That's the critical piece, right? And then when it comes to like deal making and things of that nature, a lot of the value is already set. I mean, we'll see that as April 8th comes, right? Like what teams value and things of that nature. And there's some obviously wiggle room to negotiate terms and how things are done. But really, it's always being proactive about making sure that there's a space or there's a fit for you, regardless if it's a coach, whether it's a player. Like, I understand coming from inside that you're always turning the bottom of the roster. You're always trying to look for better places, look for better players. Now coaches are tasked with looking for other places that maybe players that don't fit on the roster can go. So there's always moving around and presenting, but I like to say it's like strategic, proactive talent acquisition, right? And just making sure that you do it within the rules this way, the rules.
No, but that's the thing. The rules. I mean, who was Xavier Lucas from Wisconsin just left school, went to Miami. Like he didn't even bother with the portal. He just left.
So I think those type of situations, that's where I think it gets tricky, right? When you think of And that's why we don't consider ourselves agents at LIG Sports Group, and I'm more of an athlete development and management specialist, right? Because we're still thinking of the athlete development process. A lot of times, agents and lawyers, like the guy who did in this situation, they're not really taking into effect the player's actual career. Like there's a whole nother ecosystem outside of the laws and Congress, but how players actually move and people that have reign in the buildings and how a career goes based on anything that an agent tells you to do, whether it's your legal advice that you signed up for. So there's a lot of things like, yeah, it might be a legal win. And at the end of the day, we're just going to remember the lawyer who's going to make these claims and the different things. But that kid's career is going to be, well, I don't know how it goes in Miami, but I just know when it gets to the time to get real money, NFL teams are evaluating these different type of moves. Like these are evaluations on how you do your business. You know what I mean? So like there's a level that these players need to understand. If playing on Sundays is something that you still want to do, understand that your business moves are being evaluated. Not to say that you don't get what you're valued or you deserved, or you don't hit the transfer portal, you don't do different things. But just when you talk about the rules, there's an integrity to this game that is very gray that I feel agents don't fully understand. Sometimes lawyers that don't fully understand, and you have to navigate it very gingerly, to say the least. But have to be careful on some of the wins and losses when we just look at the long-term effects of those, because as people are drawing up rules, like they're paying attention and they're not going, like the rules or the CBA is not heavily in the favor of the players. So just be careful how you move. And there's opportunities for a lot of lawyers and agents to make claims in this space, because it's a little bit of a gold rush, right? Like it's a transitioning market. We don't even have true things. So everybody's kind of jockeying. So just, I would proceed with caution when people are just kind of doing wild things, because it's like, all right, it might be cool right now or big money right now. But if you're trying to be sustainable and have something to stand on and not build a house on sand, there's ways to move through this business that just because you're a lawyer or even an agent might not be helpful.
Well, and again, it depends on your priorities, the way that you've talked about it, the way that James Franklin talked about it. His priority is, yeah, like you want to have the best available player, but he has to fit your culture, your locker room, your team identity, your playbook, all
So
those.
much.
But there might be people, families, players, lawyers, agents, whatever, who are just like dollar amount, period.
Dollar amount.
Don't give a crap about any of that other stuff.
Shout out to my man Whipple Insider, my man Carlo. But he was like, there was a tweet where he was like, if you were a top player in PA, where would you go to school? And it was like Penn State, West Virginia, or Pitt. And then like everybody in the comments essentially saying whoever's paying the most money. And that seems like the obvious answer for a professional athlete, because a professional athlete is at the end of their development process, the commodification, they're an open market. That's not the case for a high school athlete. Like you shouldn't necessarily just go who's giving you the most money. If someone just has a bigger bank account when there isn't necessarily a budget that can just pay you a little bit more to put you at the bottom of the depth chart just in case, that might not be the best situation for a team that, doesn't have as much money, but they value as the number one guy, and you have an opportunity to grow and do whatever you need to do from that development standpoint. So it does get very nuanced and tricky when you enter, like the finances and paying of players and like the advice that guys are getting. Because again, you're talking about 17, 18, 19 years old, teenagers, right? And then when you're talking about the recruiting process, when they're going through it and trying to evaluate these different opportunities, talking as young as 13, 14 years old, like guys are getting offered in 8th grade. So like that, I don't think people really grasp just like the human nature nuance that happens throughout the recruiting process and what's happening currently in college sports. So like, yes, what James is saying about that culture fit and all those different type of things, it's not really how much money you're paying. It's like, are you paying the right person? That is like the problem solving that needs to be done and have more effort put into.
How often do you deal with coaches who don't care about culture and fit the way that Penn State does?
A lot. I mean, it's funny, right? A lot. Depending on different areas of the country, you deal with coaches that just they want to collect talent. You got to think a lot of times. I mean, it's unique certain places, but a lot of coaches operate like independent contractors, so they're getting judged based on how they acquire talent, develop talent, and deploy talent. So, I mean, like I don't care what this room's cult. I don't care what the like some coaches are like. I don't care what this culture is like. I want to make sure the guys that come play for me are deemed this way, whether it's by the rankings, whether it's fake, whether it's real or not. There's a lot of coaches that get a lot of hype off of recruiting high level players, but those players never actually, materialize into like that actual prospect that we thought he was. But they still get the benefit of landing a highly rated recruit. You know what I'm saying? And so how we judge coaches sometimes comes into that. But when you get into the nuts and bolts of it, you can start to see like who will have sustainable success based on the fundamentals. But you have to get close and see different angles to see it. That's why I think, the game and business is very siloed. A lot of people don't kind of cross over. So that's where our unique perspective kind of comes in.
The last thing I want to bring up from Franklin's interview with Andy and Ari is he was speaking about the portal windows, as we have it right now. And he said, quote, when coaches were denying kids from transferring from one school to the other, that's how we got in this mess in the first place. We went from one extreme to the other. He went on to say, I think a consensus is to have one portal window and do it after the spring game. And there's been talk about moving spring football into the summer, more like an NFL OTA model, organized team activities. He said 2024 was the longest season in Penn State history. Think about it, 16 games, 13 wins, which is great. He said trying to compete, but also trying to put contracts together and keep everybody focused on the task at hand. We've got to address the calendar of college football as a whole. And I think a really interesting thing that he said is, because it feels like a redundancy and something it's like almost, why are we doing this, is that you're doing spring practices right now, right? And then the spring portal is going to open up after the blue-white game. So he's like, I'm coaching and training guys now that might not be on my roster in 6 weeks. So Absolutely. It's kind of like, why would I do that? It doesn't make a whole lot of sense. So that's kind of the argument of move spring practices to May, June, something like that. And, oh, by the way, maybe you can get these intra-squad scrimmages that the NCAA just shot down between Colorado and Syracuse, Deion Sanders and Fran Brown. Like, there's all these other opportunities that you could afford to everybody, and at the same time protect veteran players' bodies, get new players ready, and then know what your freaking roster is after all the contracts and such have been put together. So how did you feel about the way that he phrased all that stuff?
I mean, it's right. I mean, and people don't really care because they see the big salaries that everybody earns. But like those coaches and people in the building, they work long hours. You're talking like
they gotta sleep. They gotta sleep.
I mean, you're talking 15-hour days, right? And then you say, oh, they get paid the big bucks. But you break it down. It's relative. But at the same time, to be effective at your job and win football games, like there's a lot of things that need to be done. And what he's saying is completely reasonable if you have to do that as your job. It's just hard to have sustained success when there's so many curveballs that are within the rules that can happen. And you can't necessarily plan for it. A player doesn't have to tell you if he's jumping in the transfer portal. The player doesn't have to renegotiate. You can go year to year. Like there's just so many unwritten rules, or I mean, no rules, that you have to still go out and put a product on the field and produce wins. So I completely understand what he's saying. It's not sustainable.
No. And to your point, April 8th, things are going to change again. Hopefully the calendar gets revised and the portal window is going to be revised, but it's down the line. At the end of the day, this is my takeaway. The recruiting news, really exciting. I'm going to be excited once I see them in a blue and white uniform and on the field at Beaver Stadium, and we'll see what happens. And two, I hope Penn State fans are grateful. Have some freaking gratitude for what you got right now, for what we had last season, and especially that whole Beau Pribula near debacle. Oh my God, like what could have been a disaster. So my message to everybody is express gratitude this first week of April for your college football team, because it could be so much worse. Thank you all for joining us. He's Justin. I'm Tom. This has been State of State. Thank you all so much for joining us. This episode and our entire library of shows is available now on YouTube, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and wherever else you get your podcasts. Please like, comment, subscribe, rate us, and turn on notifications. Follow us on social media at State of State Pod. Comment on our YouTube channel. And if you haven't done so already, you can become a member of our YouTube channel. For just 99 cents a month, you can get all upcoming episodes of State of State, plus our entire members-only playlist, ad-free, commercial-free. Hit the join button on our homepage or follow the link in the description of this podcast. State of State is presented by Bet Online and by Blue White Outfitters.